Hello Math 105, we're ready for section 5.3 and this is more factoring trinomials. And in this section we look at some of the harder trinomials there are to factor, and what makes them harder is we have a coefficient, a leading coefficient that is not 1. Like here we have an 8 in front of the b squared, here we have a 7 in front of this first term, and so on. So we're going to have something that's not 1 there, which requires we use a slightly different process. There are some people who like to use guess and check. I'm not really one of those people, so I'm going to show you a technique where you don't have to guess and check. We'll lead you directly to the answer. So for number 1, so the process I like to use, rather than taking the last term and saying, well, let's find 2 factors of 9 that add up to 18, that's not going to work when this leading coefficient is something other than 1. And instead, we take the leading coefficient here, which is 8, times the constant term, which is 9. So 8 times 9, that's the first thing I'm going to do. 8 times 9, I'm going to write this over to the side here. 8 times 9, use a little dot for times, is 72. I'm going to write that right there. So 8 times 9 is 72. 72 becomes very important, because that's the number we're going to look for factors of. So I'm going to look for factors of 72 that will add up to this middle coefficient. So factors of 72 that will add up to 18. So let's see if we can find some. So factors of 72, there's 1 in 72, there's 2 in 36, there's 3 in something, there's 4, I don't know. You can look at all of them. You know, I've done this beforehand, so I've looked at all of them. But sometimes you can figure them out quickly. Sometimes it takes a little while in going through all of them. But the 6 goes into 72 12 times. And 6 and 12 happen to add up to 18. So again, if you can't get there quickly, you can just go through them all. So 1 is always a good place to start. 1 times 72. 1 and 72 don't add up to 18. 2 goes into 72 36 times, but 2 and 36 don't add up to 18. 3 goes into 72, I forget how many times, but yeah, so you just go through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so when you get to 6, it actually works. 6 times 12 is 72, and 6 plus 12 is 18. Now what we do with the 6 and the 12 next is going to help us factor this thing. What we're going to do is take this middle term, which was 18b to begin with, and rewrite it as 2 terms. We're going to write it as 6b plus 12b. So I use these 2 guys to rewrite this expression with 4 terms. The 18b gets replaced with 6b plus 12b. And we leave the 9 alone. So now if you look at this expression, it has 4 terms. And if you remember what we did in section 5.1, if we had 4 terms, we factored by grouping. So let's try that. When we factor by grouping, we take the first 2 and the second 2 and factor something out of each of those pairs. So 8b squared and 6b, 2 can come out of there, and a b. And what we're left with here, let's see, 2 goes in 8 4 times, so we have 4b here. And 2b times 3 is 6b. And then we look at the next 2. What can we take out of a 12b and a 9? Well, 3 goes into both of those, I think. And 3 times 4 is 12, so 3 times 4b plus 3. And what do you know? Look what's in parentheses. In both parts, we have a 4b plus 3. And so, just as we did before, we think of this as a group and this as a group. And both of those groups have a 4b plus 3. So we factor out the 4b plus 3. I'll do that over here. Let's see. And what we are left with is a 2b plus 3. And then we are completely factored. That would be your answer. Again, I suggest if you're not sure, check, right? Foil this thing out and make sure you get back to where you started. Again, some people do like to use guess and check. They could say, well, I know, let's see, factors of 8 are 8 and 1 or 4 and 2. So those are your choices, really. It happened to end up being 4 and 2. But if you guessed 8 and 1, you'd have to check. Factors of 9, you could use 9 and 1 or 3 and 3. So there are a lot of combinations that could happen. So you might end up doing a lot of work to check if you were guessing and checking. But if that's something you're familiar with, something you did in high school and you like that, feel free to do it. I'm not going to tell you how you actually have to do these, but I do need to see some work. If you guess and check, make sure you do the work, and if I ask you to upload your work, you need to do that. Show the checking. I like this process because I don't have to check a bunch of different cases, or any case really, until the end, and then you could check this. 4b times 2b, 8b squared. 4b times 3 is 12b, 2b times 3 is 6b. Those together give us the 18b, and then 3 times 3 gives us the 9. So I know I'm good. All right, let's look at the next one. This one has this extra variable, but we really do it the same way. We take the coefficient, 7 and 8, leading coefficient, and coefficient of the last term. We multiply those together. 7 times 8 is 56. And we find two factors of 56 that add up to the middle term, 18, or the middle coefficient, 18. So let's see, factors of 56. Again, you could do 1 and 56, 2 and, what is 2 and 28, right? That's not going to work. 3 doesn't go into 56, so 4 and 14. And 4 and 14 happens to work, right? Because 4 plus 14 gives you the 18 that you need right here. So then once you have the 4 and the 14, you're going to rewrite this expression with 4 terms. 7a squared b plus 4ab plus 14ab. So we rewrite the middle term with 2 terms. We just replace the 18 with the 4 and the 14 and add those together. And then we leave the last term alone, plus 8b. All right, so we have an expression with 4 terms. And just like in section 5.1, we will try to factor by grouping. All right, so we group those two together, these two together, and we factor something out of both groups. There's no number we can take out of both of those, but we can take out an A and a B, right? So let's just take out an A and a B. And in here we're left with what is 7A. And here we're left with just a 4, right? A 4. 7A plus 4. Make sure I did that right. I think that's good. So, over here, what can we take out of both of these? Well, it looks like we can take out a 2, right? 2. And let's see, what are we left with? We can take out a B also, 2B. And we're left with a 7A plus 4. All right, so we have a 7A plus 4 in both parts. That's a good thing, right? So we, again, think of this as a group and this as a group. And then I'm going to write my answer up here. The 7A plus 4 then, that's 2B. 7A plus 4 we can take out of both of those groups. So we have a 7A plus 4. And what we are left with then is the AB here and plus 2B there. Now you may be thinking, maybe you didn't do something quite right there, Mr. Rohn, because if you look, it looks like we could take out a B from both of these, right? Yeah, it's a good thing to check. So once I have my 2 binomials, you could see if there's something you can take out of one of those. And my big problem was, if you look at this to begin with, notice there's a B that can come out of all of those. So I should have factored out a B in the beginning. That's the first thing to look for, really, is if there's a GCF we can take out, and we could have taken out a B in the beginning. But all is not lost, because you can do that at the end as well. If I notice one of my binomials has something you can factor out, and this second one does, you can factor out a B from both of those. You can do it then too. So I can factor out a b, so I have 7a plus 4. And I can factor out a b from both of those. So I'm going to write times b times a plus 2. You might reorganize it. Usually if there's a single variable that's factored out, people like to put it in the front. So you don't have to. You could leave it like this and that's fine, but some convention really is to put that b in the front. They're all factors, so it doesn't matter what order they're in. I can write it like that. And that would be a good answer. There we go. Now the next one, I've just to save time, I've gone ahead and done this one, but I'll walk through what I did. Leading coefficient 10, last term's coefficients 21. We multiply those, we get 210. And we've got to find two factors of 210 that add up to negative 29. After some searching, I found negative 14 and negative 15. If you multiply those, you get 210. If you add them, you get negative 29. So then I rewrite this with those two as our middle terms. We replace the negative 29 CT with negative 14 CT and negative 15 CT. Then we have four terms. We factor by grouping. We can take a 2c out of the first two, a negative 3t out of the second two, and in parentheses in both places you get a 5c minus 7t. So then we take the 5c minus 7t, factor it out, and we're left with the 2c minus 3t. And we have completely factored that one. So I went through that one kind of fast, but good thing about video, you can pause it, you can go and try to do this one on your own even. It's not a bad idea. Number 4, I would in fact suggest you do that at this point in time. This is a typical problem you might see on a test or quiz or homework assignment. So pause the video for a second, try to do number 4, and then unpause it and see if what you got matches with what I got. Alright, so 8 times 3, that's what we start with, right? 8 times 3. Leading coefficient, constant term, that's 24, right? We need two factors of 24 that add up to 10. This one's not too bad. 6 times 4 is 24, and 6 plus 4 is 10, right? So we're going to replace the 10q with the 6q plus 4q. And so we have 8q squared plus 6q plus 4q plus 3. All right. Then we factor by grouping. So I'm going to group these two together. I'm going to group these two together. See what we can do, right? The first two, I think the only thing I can take out is a 2, right? And a q. 2q. And we're left with 4q plus 3. Now the next two, if you look at this, you say, well, I can't take anything out of both of those. The only thing you can take out is a 1, right? And if that happens, you actually have to write the 1. So plus 1 times 4q plus 3. Notice in parentheses we still have the same binomial, so we can take those guys, think of this as a group and this as a group, and we factor out the 4q plus 3 from both of those groups. So your answer then becomes 4q plus 3, and what we're left with is a 2q plus 1. There's the 1 right there. Again, you can always check your answer by using the FOIL method, multiply those out, and make sure you get what we have here. Again, if you're one of those people who like to use guess and check, you go ahead, but make sure you check. The biggest problem with guess and check that I usually see is people will guess, but they don't check. I see a lot of people have an answer like, on this one, they might have an answer like 4q plus 1 times 2q plus 3, but that wouldn't actually work. But they don't check it, and so they assume it's correct, and it's not. So, all right, number 5, I did this one as well already, and so I'll kind of walk through that one, but you might try it. Pause the video and try it. I know the answer's right there, but anyway. So we multiply 3 times 4, you get 12. You got to find two factors of 12 that add up to 8. Well, 6 and 2 happen to work. 6 plus 2 is 8. You rewrite the middle term as two terms. 3a squared plus 6ab plus 2ab plus 4b squared. Then we think of these as two groups. We factor by grouping. We factor a 3a out of the first two. We can factor a 2b out of the second two. And so we get the same thing in parentheses, a plus 2b, which means we can factor out an a plus 2b, and we are left with a 3a plus 2b. And this is completely factored. All right, we look at this last one. I'm not going to make the little mistake I made before, even though we were able to correct it at the end. If you look at this one, what can we factor out of all three terms? That's a good thing to always check for. 4, 14, and 8, they're all even, right? So we can factor a 2 out of all of them to begin with. We can factor out a GCF, which might make our job a little easier in the end. If we do that, then we end up with a 2c squared plus 7cd minus 4d squared. All right. So now our trinomial doesn't have as big of numbers, which might make things a little easier. So I'm going to just focus on the trinomial. The 2 will continue to follow along with our answer, but we don't need to consider it for this next part. So to find what we need to split this middle term up into, we can take 2 times negative 4, right? And 2 times negative 4 is a negative 8. We want to find two factors of negative 8 that will add up to 7, right? So how about 8 and negative 1? I think that'll work, right? Let's do 8 plus negative 1. That will give us the 7 that we need, right? So this is going to look like this 2 doesn't go away. It's still out here. The trinomial, we're going to turn it into a 4-term polynomial. We could call it a quadrinomial. So we have a 2c squared still. The 7cd we replace with plus 8cd and minus 1, or just minus cd, right? And then we have a minus 4d squared. Now we have our 4-term polynomial in the parentheses that we can factor by grouping. We put these two together, we put these two together, and then we say, what do we say? Well, let's factor, well, this 2 doesn't go away, we'll leave it out here. So let's see what we have. So we can factor a 2c out of these first two. And then this becomes a c plus 4d. We have some negatives, so I'm going to factor out a negative. Looks like we factor out a negative d, right? Minus d. And then we're left with a c plus 4d again. Alright, so this looks big and ugly, but notice we have our c plus 4d in both places here. This 2 doesn't go away. And we should be able to make this into 2 binomials now. Okay. In parentheses, again, we thought of this as a group, and this is a group. Both those groups have a c plus 4d, and we're left with a 2c minus d. And we are complete. You could multiply that out, use the FOIL method with the binomials, and then distribute the 2 after that, and you should get back to what we have up here. And so those were quite a few examples we did of that type of trinomial where the leading coefficient is not 1. Those are the harder ones, but there's a nice process. You can follow that process, and hopefully you won't have any trouble with problems from section 5.3. Alright, so that's it for 5.3. The next video will be 5.4, and we'll see you guys then.